All right, it's the next day. I incinerated the foils really nicely. I cooked them in the oven to get rid of any extra grease or things like that. Now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make aqua regia, and in order to make that, I use 3 parts hydrochloric acid and 1 part nitric acid. So let me put about 75 milliliters of hydrochloric acid over these foils. Then I'm going to take my nitric acid. Also, if you store nitric acid, it doesn't like bright light, so I should have used a dark amber container instead of a clear glass one to store it. So the darker containers do a little bit better job. Now I'm going to use probably about 20 to 25 milliliters. And this is actually going to dissolve the gold. So the gold's going to go into solution also. I'm going to turn my heat on. We're going to give it a couple seconds. We're going to see if we can get a reaction. And already an instant reaction. Now I'm going to put my plate over this so the fumes don't escape. And I'm going to let that sit for a second. I'll be right back. Okay, I almost have a runaway reaction, so I'm going to turn the temperature down. I added a little too much nitric too fast. That's why the bubbles are all the way up. And I'm having really, really strong fume production. I actually think I'm going to take it off the heat for a second. It is a runaway. You see it splattering on the, can't really see it, but it's actually splattering all over the place. A lot of people with more experience, they put these in a Corningware container because this all has gold in it and it's basically splattering all over the place. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna clean this up and I'm gonna get this in a paper towel. I collected everything in a paper towel, and you're gonna wanna save this because this liquid actually has gold. So I put it in a jar with my my filters, and I'm gonna save onto that. I'm gonna rinse this down. Now, unfortunately, I lost some gold. I'm gonna clean this up. It's all cleaned up, and I'm gonna let this just keep on cooking for a little bit, and then I'm gonna slowly add more nitric. All right, it looks like everything's dissolved. Unfortunately, I lost a little bit from that boil over, so that really stinks. Like what I was saying before, a lot of more experienced people, they'll get like a Corningware container in case there's a boil over to hold everything. Now I'm gonna filter this. Now what you see coming out there, that's gonna be the pure liquid gold. It's pretty dirty, so this is probably gonna need 2 total refinings with this aqua regia. And what the aqua regia does is, so the nitric bath dissolves all the base metals and all the things you don't want, but it leaves the gold. Well, the aqua regia bath, it actually eats the gold and it turns the gold into liquid. So we're gonna filter out this liquid. This liquid's pretty dirty. It should be a lot cleaner than that. So that leaves me to think that there was a lot of impurities in this. So we're gonna clean this out. by filtering it. And then once it filters, we're gonna drop the gold using sodium metabisulfite. I'll be back in a second once we're further along filtering. As I was filtering this off, I noticed there was still a tiny bit of metal. So I'm gonna take a dropper and I'm gonna add about 2 milliliters of fresh nitric acid to it. All right, let's see if we get a little bit of reaction. Slowly add it so I don't get a boil over. All right, there is a reaction, so it's continuing to eat a little bit more of that gold. I'm gonna let that sit, and then it should be finished. And we're still filtering also. I don't know if you can see it, it's so sunny out here, it's hard to tell where the camera's facing. But I'm gonna let this cook away. That gas, those fumes are pretty strong. That's another reason why you really have to do this outside. Those fumes are extremely toxic. And you can see they're pretty dark. So just be careful. All right, this seemed to be a really slow process. I'm almost finished. I actually ended up filtering it in 2 separate filters just because it was taking so long. I really think down the line I might buy a vacuum system to help speed this up. Just a quick observation, I've used both these beakers quite a bit. The Pyrex beaker, it really seems to, look at how crystal clear it is. I mean, these both went through the exact same thing. In fact, this went through more work, and it really seems to say, look at how clear it is. I mean, it's just not holding any of the moisture on the walls. For some weird reason, this cheaper Carter one, it works great, but it seems to be a little bit harder to see through. Anyways, let me show you all the gunk inside these filters. Now, I'm gonna save these filters because we process all these filters separate. We don't wanna get rid of anything. And if you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a bit of a purplish tint, and purple is the color of gold. So we definitely want to save these. I keep rinsing them out with distilled water until the liquid coming out of the bottom is crystal clear, because all this liquid has gold in it. So a couple more minutes. Once these are all filtered, I'm gonna put them in a separate beaker, and then we're gonna add some S&B, and then we're gonna see how much drops. And then we're probably gonna end up purifying that again, just because I don't like how dirty this solution was. It really was a lot dirtier than I thought it was gonna be. The solution was transferred into a clean beaker, and now we're gonna do a stannous chloride test, which is a little test to see if there's gold in solution, which there should be, because, well, there should be. So I don't have my tweezers, unfortunately. So let me dip a little piece of filter paper. And if there is gold in solution, this is going to turn darker. Which it is. Not a ton, but it is turning darker. All right. Now, I'm gonna add some urea to denox the solution in case there's any excess nitric. Just a little bit to see what reaction I get. Just a few pieces. Not much of a reaction at all, so we're good to drop the gold. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna add some sodium metabisulfate, and this will cause the gold to precipitate to the bottom. So I'm gonna add a little bit at a time. Should have a spoon, but I don't know where I put it. And I'm gonna keep adding it, and then you'll kind of have an idea when you have enough when it starts to foam up at the top. So keep adding it, and eventually you'll see white bubbles come to the top, and that's when you know you're pretty much dropped everything. Almost there. There we go. Perfect. And as usual, I am having an overflow. I'm not having good luck with this. And now I'm gonna let it sit a little bit, and then we'll see where the gold's at in about 30 minutes. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour off the gold that should have settled to the bottom in my big 5,000 milliliter beaker. So if there's any I missed, it'll settle to the bottom. So let me slowly, I'm not using a filter because I could just collect this. And now the fumes this puts off when you add the SMB, the sodium metabisulfate, it's pretty nasty smelling. Even outdoors, you gotta, I sit a distance away. Every once in a while you get a good whiff of it and it just, whew, it's brutal. All right, you can see our pure gold powder. Looks all right, but I actually think I'm gonna put it into Aqua Regia and dissolve it again. Even though I'm gonna lose a little bit, I really want the purity to be really, really high. So, as you can see what's going on here, I missed a little bit of the gold precipitate, so there's still some that I'm filtering out. I keep the rest of it in that large beaker, and then you'd be surprised, after a couple days you'll have a little bit more settle at the bottom. Even if it's 0.1, 0.2 grams of gold powder, it still adds up. So you try to save as much as possible. Technically, I could heat this up and put it into a gold bead, but I think I'm gonna add it to Aqua Regia one more time, just to clean it out. So I added that filter, as it had some gold foils. Now we're gonna turn this into Aqua Regia. I'm gonna add about, not that much, 75 milliliters of hydrochloric acid. This shouldn't take much at all, because this should be pretty pure, at least compared to before. Then I'm gonna add probably about, I'm gonna use my dropper, and I'm gonna add probably about 4 milliliters of nitric acid. Right, got it right around the 4 millimeter mark, and I'm gonna slowly add it in. Actually, that should be enough. Let me just do 2 milliliters before I go too crazy and see what happens. I'm gonna put it on the heat. I left my watch plate inside, but let me zoom in so you can actually see the gold dissolve. You should be able to see it start to dissolve. Let me go grab my watch glass really quickly to cover this. All right, I'm back. Now let's actually add a little more nitric. Just a couple drops. Let me turn the heat on. I'm gonna put it to medium low. I'm gonna put my little plate back on. And now if you look closely, the little gold particles are already starting to dissolve into the liquid. So I'm gonna let this cook for a couple more minutes and I'll be back.